Why is my progesterone so low? Signs, causes, and symptoms, and solutions. What you can do about it. You may have had lab work done to know that progesterone levels are low. Maybe you have a sneaking suspicion that your progesterone levels are low. Let's talk a little bit about some of the symptoms that come with low progesterone, which many women are dealing with these days. There can be anxiety, mood swings, insomnia, hot flashes, sore and tender breasts. These are just some of the symptoms that we see with low progesterone. Not fun stuff at all. In fact, in our space, progesterone is referred to as like natural Xanax. It helps calm us, it helps us give us good sleep. There's a lot of functions that proper progesterone levels in the body really help support. We want to make sure that that's happening. And many women are having lower progesterone levels these days, oftentimes as a result of something called estrogen dominance. So you may have heard that term before. There's a lot of things in our environment that are affecting estrogen levels. There are the xenoestrogens, which aren't estrogen that's native to the body. They are basically toxic estrogens that are attaching to the hormone receptors in the body and creating this estrogen dominant situation where estrogen and progesterone should oppose each other very nicely. And now, because of some of these exposures, we're having a situation where the estrogen is higher than it should be in the body, and it's creating lower progesterone levels. If you've experienced some of these symptoms, you may have estrogen dominance or low progesterone, or you may have low estrogen and low progesterone. Now here's the kicker. You really have to have good comprehensive functional lab work done to be able to look at if that's the actual case or not. I'm going to share some strategies how to support estrogen levels, some things that I feel like are safe even without having lab work done, but then we'll talk about some other strategies that can be very supportive, but you just need to know what those levels are. And anytime you're doing something to influence hormones, you really want to have a good gauge on what that baseline lab work looks like and how it's influencing all of that as well. Really important to have comprehensive lab work done that includes a full hormone panel that you can kind of get a really good picture of what's going on and how to be able to support it, including progesterone. So let's talk about some foods that you can eat that are really good at supporting progesterone levels. One of my favorites, and that I do all the time, organic sprouted pumpkin seeds are a great way to help support progesterone levels. In fact, you may have heard of seed cycling before, where there are different times during your menstrual cycle that you can work with certain seeds to help support the hormone production. Right before your cycle, progesterone really is lowest during that period of time. So that's a great time to start making sure that you're supporting with some of those pumpkin seeds. Another thing that helps with progesterone levels and estrogen dominance both are cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli, cabbage, kale. All of the things that fall in that cruciferous vegetable category are really wonderful to help with that estrogen dominance and support progesterone levels as well. So those are just a few things that you can look at to help support that. I know flax seeds or flax meal oftentimes is looked at just for estrogen, but it can really be helpful oftentimes supporting progesterone levels as well. So oftentimes what I will do, instead of using flour, I'll use organic flaxseed meal as my flour to really help support some of that hormone production as well, which is really great way. We always want to look at what we can do to support through nutrition first. So those are some really great things to work with that can have a really wonderful impact on raising some of those progesterone levels for you as well. Other things that you can look at once you do comprehensive lab work are things to really support progesterone production. There are certain herbs that can work really well at doing that. One of the things that I like to work with is chaste tree or vitex. But once again, you don't want to start working with something like that unless you know where those levels are, because even though it's natural and it's an herb, once you're influencing hormones, you can really do things that aren't so great if those levels are already adequate or on the high side, and then you're taking an herb that really increases that, or it can create an imbalance in a different way, which is not good either. And I know a lot of people are working with topical progesterone creams or wild yam, and I would really caution working with some of these things, because Once you start giving the body progesterone, it signals the brain to stop producing progesterone altogether. Not that there's never a time and a place. Sometimes there is a time and a place to work with these sort of things as you're working with supportive strategies to get the body naturally increasing progesterone level on its own. However, you have to be really careful once people start working with some of these things, just to be aware that you're signaling the body to stop all of that hormone production, because now you're giving it something exogenously or something that the body's not producing, you're giving it outside. You just really want to be careful and recognize that comes with its own set of issues. In addition to, I've seen this happen, and this actually happened to me as well at one point. When progesterone was low, I was put on some progesterone, on a compounded progesterone pill. I had done compounded topical progesterone and then a compounded pill, bioidentical estrogen, but because there were so many underlying reasons upstream that had not been addressed, the root cause with different stressors, including environmental toxins, just different emotional stressors that had not been dealt with, there was a real issue once I started using some of this topical and oral progesterone at different times, because there were hormone receptor issues. So I started to gain weight and I started to have all of these other issues. You just really have to look at risk versus benefit. And I would really not recommend anybody starting out the gate with something like that. Really working with what can we do to really address the upstream root cause as to why some of these hormone levels are low. People just kind of assume that it's age. Yes, to some degree, some of these levels will decline to some degree with age, but there's really great ways to support some of this, especially once we look at some of the damage that may have happened to the hypothalamus through environmental toxins or emotional stressors or physical stressors that the body may have had over time. Hypothalamus is a part of the brain that works on metabolism, and it actually controls temperature and a number of other things, but it also has a lot to do with how hormones are released as well. If we fix some of the damage or dysregulation that's happened in that hypothalamus, it's kind of remarkable what happens and the cascading effect that it has on all of the other hormones, including progesterone, once that is supported. Now, another thing is that when progesterone levels are low, remember how I mentioned there can be anxiety, mood swings, that sort of thing going on, because progesterone can be very closely tied to some emotional stressors that someone has dealt with over time too. So it becomes this vicious cycle where maybe there's been an emotional stressor, now that progesterone's low, now that's causing a lot of anxiety, even having that progesterone low. So one of the things that we love to address is the nervous system regulation piece, which I don't think many of the functional medicine practitioners that I've seen in our space are really giving this the due diligence that it needs, the attention that the nervous system regulation piece needs. Because if we can start supporting the stress response in the body and offload that burden, that stress burden, and get the body more resilient from a stress standpoint, it's remarkable how much of an impact that can have on hormones in general, including progesterone production. I hope that was some helpful information for you. I don't know if you know that you have low progesterone because you have had lab work done and it's been discovered that that's an issue for you, or if it's something that you suspect and you have maybe asked to have lab work done. Unfortunately, the way that the medical model works, it's really difficult. You're just not going to get that comprehensive lab work done in a doctor's office without paying out of pocket for it anymore. We really recommend for our health participants just to do a comprehensive hormone functional panel. It's something that we offer. I know a lot of other functional practitioners do as well, for you to get a very comprehensive view of what's going on, as opposed to getting a few pieces from your medical provider here and there and trying to piecemeal that together. I always say it's like trying to create a sentence without vowels. You know, when you don't have all of the information, it makes it really difficult to make the best recommendations on how to support your situation. If you've got questions about that, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help. There's some really, really amazing gold nuggets that we can get from lab work, and that can be so helpful to help you on your journey and support your hormone health, so that you aren't dependent on a bunch of medications and injections or whatever for the rest of your life. I hope that was some helpful information for you. If it was, please like and share this video. Health and happiness. Have a super fantastic day. Thanks so much.